me. For those who are not familiar, FASEB is a federation of 31 scientific and professional societies. Collectively, we represent over 130,000 researchers. And our mission really is to work on advancing health and welfare, and we do so by promoting progress in science, particularly biomedical sciences. We work very closely with our 31 member societies on collaborative advocacy, and this webinar is part of our collaborative advocacy program. For those of you who, again, are not familiar with FASEB, you may recognize some of these logos on your screen. These represent the FASEB member societies that are part of our organization. And our 31st just joined last year. I'm now going to go ahead and turn over this presentation to my colleague Bethany, who's going to walk you through this new slide deck that is available on our website. Also wanted to let folks know that while you should have this as part of the webinar information from GoToWebinar, we will make sure that everybody who's participating today gets a follow-up email from us that also includes a link on how to read this on our website.
Thank you, Jennifer. And as a quick note, if you go to your GoToWebinar dashboard, there is a section labeled handouts, and a copy of this slide deck is available there for you to download. We also keep it on our website, and we'll show you where to find that in our follow-up email. We do intend to update this slide deck over time as new information comes out and there are new stories we can highlight. So please come back to our website if you plan to use it again in the future. That slide deck addresses three major themes. The first is the history and rationale for public supportive research. And when you're presenting this to an audience, you want to answer these questions. Why did the government start funding research the way it does now? And why has it continued to sponsor research? This next section is the ROI, or return on investment of research. And so you want to convince your audience about what ways research has benefited the public or benefited taxpayers. This slide deck addresses health benefits, economic benefits, and public good. And finally, the last section addresses the outlook for sustained funding. You want your audience wondering, well, will research continue to be supported? And what can I do to encourage the government to continue funding research? This slide deck is designed to be used off the shelf, but we really encourage you to customize it for your audience, and we'll describe ways you can do that later on. But this slide deck also has a lot of resources baked in that you might not notice unless you peek at the notes panel. On the first slide in the notes panel, there's an entire FAQ that summarizes a lot of the things we're talking about today on the webinar. In addition, for most slides, there are citations, resources, and background information that gives you a more in-depth look about the topic of each slide. And for some of these, the resources have a little star next to them. And those are appropriate for non-technical audiences. Here is an example of the notes panel for one of our slides that describes how federally funded research has reduced infant mortality and made infants healthier in our country. As you can see, there are additional points that we couldn't fit in the slide itself that you might want to raise when you present the slide, as well as where we found all that information if you want to go dig back to the original resources. So this is a slide from early on in the presentation, and it describes the origins of federal support. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the word background. And this gives you a sense of what topics this slide is covering. As we go through, you'll see ones that say health, economics, etc. So you'll have a feeling of what you're supposed to be communicating with each slide. This slide goes more into the history of research funding. And if you go into the notes panel for this one, you'll find out a lot about Van Bush's report, Science the Endless Frontier, which really articulated the philosophy for federally funded research. Second slide in that series also addresses why research continues to be funded in the modern day. Jumping along, we also have several slides on the health impacts of research. This one focuses on vaccines, includes some very summary statistics about how vaccines have improved our health, but also, if you notice in the lower left-hand corner, includes a thumbnail of our breakthroughs for bioscience publication on this topic. Throughout this presentation, we include thumbnails of several of our breakthroughs in bioscience, as well as Horizons in Bioscience series articles. These are all appropriate for general audiences. And if you go into the notes panel, we include the web address so you can download those PDFs directly and use them as handouts if you'd like. Other slides in the series include healthier babies, new medication, and longer lives. The next section addresses what types of public goods federally funded research has produced. This one in particular covers the knowledge and patents produced through research. There's some really great economic research on how NIH and other federally funded research has led to patents in the private sector. One thing I found really fascinating about this research was they found that about half of the patents were citing papers that were from a different field, so research in one area not only sometimes, but actually quite frequently leads to discoveries and breakthroughs in other areas. And the final area of the ROI, or return on investment in research, that we cover are economics. This slide in particular addresses the high-quality jobs in the U.S. bioscience industry, which outperforms the total private sector in terms of the increase in employment, wages, and increase in wages. There are also slides describing what new commercial sectors have come about through scientific research, as well as new companies. If, for example, you know somebody who was part of a spin-off company from the research, that would be a great thing to describe when you're showing that type of slide. Then, moving into the last section of the presentation, we look into the outlook for research. And we have some graphs like this one that show how the U.S. is just not keeping pace with growing foreign R&D investments. As you can see, U.S. investments have grown, but just not at the same rate as other countries. We also have slides describing new opportunities for research, noting that discoveries in one research area gives us the tools to make further discoveries in others. We highlight several of our breakthroughs and Horizons of Bioscience, including one on cancer vaccines. And we also go over funding trends for research agencies and end on a hopeful note, recognizing the recent increases in the NIH budget in 2016 and 2017 and the positive outlook for 2018. Finally, we have two slides about how people can take action and make a difference. This one gives a few ideas of what members of the audience might do, and the other one includes what resources people might find on the FASEB website. So now that you've seen a bunch of the slides and have a general sense of what's in there for you, we'll talk about how you can effectively present and share this information. As I mentioned before, we really encourage you to customize and add your stories when you go to present the slide deck. Obviously, time constraints are very important. If you only have 5 minutes, you might only want to pick about 5 slides to present. So remove and rearrange as needed to fit those time constraints. Also, to make your presentation more compelling, add your own examples and stories. You might talk about your research projects. You might discuss exciting developments in your field or your own experiences as a PI, as a trainee, and even as a clinician. But really try to make it your own. We then build in individual patient stories or examples like that so that people can put their own experiences in there. It's more interesting if we all tell different stories and show the breadth of research than all tell the same one story. Ideally, if someone saw someone present this 5 times, from 5 different scientists. Each presentation would have something different and interesting in the content. I want to give you a few examples of how you might customize it to yourself. You don't have to create really fancy slides. You might just pick a single picture that represents the additional topic you want to discuss. Here are some that I would have picked myself. I'm kind of a history buff, so I really find the story of penicillin very compelling, especially in regards to how it helped bring a lot of public support for research funding. So as many of you know, penicillin was discovered in 1928 by Fleming, but he lacked the resources and capacity to develop means of purifying and extracting it himself. And that wasn't done until 1938. So it was actually in the midst of World War II where we had large-scale production and actual deployment of penicillin to the field. So the soldiers on the field actually saw in real time the difference that penicillin made. And of course, personal stories about disease are great. Many people would first think of cancer and heart disease, but one disease that hits home for me is post-polio syndrome, which is something my family has had to deal with. And this one ties in nicely with the vaccine slide. Many people think of polio as a disease that injures during the infection, but it can leave long-lasting injury and result many decades after the infection in post-polio syndrome, which is progressively debilitating loss of muscle mass, muscle size, and muscle strength. But sometimes your story just might not have a good image for it. In that case, you might just want to use one of our slides and talk about how your experiences fit into that topic. For example, I'm also showing a slide of the NIH funding trends and showing the lost capacity over the years. And I would discuss how that had affected my time in training and the career choices for myself as well as fellow trainees during those declining budgets. So who do we want to reach out to? Well, we want to reach out to scientists, Congress, and the public. And you might be wondering why scientists are on that list. Well, we all need to be advocates for science. We all need to be able to make the case for why federal funding is necessary for the research enterprise. So we want to make sure our colleagues are also empowered to be able to respond to comments and criticisms about the research they do. And we all will probably be sitting at some point around a table, maybe this Thanksgiving, maybe at some other event, with people who might not see science the way we do. And we need to be able to respond to those concerns. So help your colleagues become good advocates by presenting some of this information at maybe a lab meeting, a journal club, a scientific talk, or a seminar. And be prepared to be flexible. Then you might not be able to get the whole time, but even if you can spend about 5 minutes covering one of these topics, that's worthwhile. So how do you do this? Well, first, make arrangements and get permission if needed. You don't want to hijack anyone's meeting or journal club. Many people would be very open to having this topic presented, but just make sure you get the permission first. Then you'll want to make sure that people know you're doing it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Your journal club might advertise through emails or flyers, so just do the emails or flyers, look at what others have done, and just follow suit. Make sure you really take time to prepare your talk, selecting the slides, customizing them, adding your own story to them. And select handouts. FASEB has a ton of great handouts for the scientific community. We're showing a few here, and we will send you links later on to where you can find them on our website. These include our state and district funding sheets, so you can see how research funding is pouring into your own community. NIH funding trends fact sheet, so you can demonstrate how NIH funding has changed over time, as well as some really detailed data compilations on that for those who really want to dig into the nitty-gritty. When you are presenting, encourage your audience to stay informed. FASEB has some great resources for people to keep up to date with that, and we really encourage you and your colleagues to sign up for our Washington Update newsletter, as well as our advocacy alerts. And always offer help to people to find resources on this topic. This isn't an issue that's covered in a lot of training, so people often don't even know where to start looking. And so please help them. And After the presentation, of course, follow up and share the materials people asked for, and include links for FASEB, Washington Update newsletter, and advocacy alert. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Jennifer about reaching Congress.
Thank you, Bethany. We initially actually got to work on this project based on a request that we got from one of our member societies, the American Society for Human Genetics, who reached out to us last year and asked if we had a central resource that could be used to talk about the benefits of biomedical research. And initially, when we put this together, we figured this was something that would be good for use in the scientific community. But since then, we've begun to think a little bit more strategically about how else this might be used. There's a lot of really good and interesting information here, and as Bethany noted, this is one of the rare resources where everything is pulled together in one document that can be customized or expanded or even decreased a little bit based on your time. It's also fully annotated with resources and references. So now what we're hoping to do is to have folks use this to start reaching out to members of Congress. And really, in this way, it's a pretty unique tactic. We do have a lot of support, thankfully, from Congress for increasing NIH and continuing to provide the federal science agencies with necessary resources. But it never hurts to remind or show your senators and representatives what's been accomplished with federal support for research. Even the ones who vote year after year consistently for these increases. This is a pretty broad topic, and a friendly reminder every now and then is not a bad idea. We also want to reassure our elected officials that federal funding for research benefits everyone in their state and district, even if they actually don't get federal dollars flowing to their district. This is something that broadly benefits society, so when they support funding for research, they really are helping their constituents. We also want to convince a small segment of Congress, the more fiscally conservative members of Congress, those who are concerned about the debt and spending, that the long-term return on investment in biomedical research is worth what we call the upfront cost, or the immediate budgetary impact. As folks in the research community know, sometimes it can be years before a research advancement really becomes applicable to clinical care or results in a drug that winds up in someone's medicine cabinet. So because of that, we need to continue funding research year after year. But this is different than other parts of the budget where Congress could assign funding to something like, I don't know, a ship to be used in the military. And then 3 years later, that ship, there's a christening and a ceremony, and you can see the results of that. So this is another reason why we wanted to have this slide deck. In terms of where it can be used to reach members of Congress, well, the sky's kind of the limit, but a couple of things that may be available to you locally. If you have a face-to-face meeting with your member of Congress or even one of their staff aides, you can bring along copies of these slides. And again, you can tailor them and shrink them to the amount of time you have available. It's not a bad idea. You can bring a full copy of the slide deck and just walk through 2 or 3 pages of it. Town hall meetings, this would require a little bit more creativity in doing this, but if your member of Congress is hosting a town hall meeting and wants to hear about constituent concerns, you can use the information in this slide deck to put together a very short presentation, 2 to 3 minutes to explain why you as a voter support funding for research and what the benefit is to everyone in that state or district. And then last but not least, some members of Congress have started to have local health fairs where they invite people in the community to have tables and present information or reach out to their constituents. So if that's an opportunity that comes by you, you can use this as a way to interact with the public and make copies of the slide deck and try and engage people in conversations. In terms of reaching Congress, very similar to reaching out to the scientific community, you're going to want to break down your preparation into the before, during, and after phase to make sure you're well organized. First step is to make arrangements to set up a meeting with your member of Congress. We recommend reaching out to them in their local offices and states. Less travel time for you, and you may have a better chance of actually getting more time with them. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some resources that FASEB has to go about requesting a meeting. You're going to want to go ahead and kind of look at all the slides and review them and prepare your presentation, customize it. Usually when you have a meeting with a member of Congress even at home, you have a pretty limited time period and there won't be time to go through all the slides. So we recommend pulling out a few slides that might be relevant to that member of Congress. And you can go on their website or their Twitter feed and see if they have expressed an interest or support for a particular disease or population and customize your talk to that. And also, you may want to bring some additional handouts with you to the meeting. We had, as Stephanie mentioned, we have now state and district fact sheets that talk about the amount of NIH funding that's going to each state. We also have district information about the National Science Foundation and competitively funded agriculture research, as well as the Department of Energy Office of Science. FASEB every year issues their federal funding recommendations where we tell Congress what we think the budgets for these research agencies should be. And then the last document, thumbnail on this particular slide, is a one-page fact sheet that we put together showing the trends in NIH funding over the last decade or so. This is a common question that we get from members of Congress, particularly newer members who may not have been around, who want to know what's been happening to the NIH budget. At the meeting, you always want to thank them for meeting with you. That's a great way to start the discussion. Print out and bring copies of the handouts with you. You'll probably want to provide them electronically afterwards, and all of these things are available on the FASEB website. Just as a reminder, after this webinar, we are going to send you a follow-up email that will include not only the slide deck itself, but a number of links to the handouts that are referenced here in the presentation. And you can always end the meeting by offering to serve as a continual resource to those members of Congress. What may be less well known is that while members of Congress have their own staff, they don't have a lot of help, and they don't have a lot of aides, and they may not even have anyone on their staff who is well-versed in science issues. So if you can provide yourself as an informal, impartial advisor or resource that they can turn to if they have questions, it's a great way to open up a relationship with your elected officials. Finally, once you're done with the meeting, it's always appropriate, and we recommend that you send a thank you email. Getting actual hard copies of documents and mail into congressional offices right now is still very difficult because of security concerns, even at the local level. So an email is a perfectly appropriate way to follow up, and in fact, it's a great way to provide your contact information. That email should be short, but try and reiterate your main points. And then include electronic links to any of the documents that you gave them in hard copy form during the meeting. One pro tip that we've learned at FASEB over the years, it's not a great idea to send text-heavy PDF attachments in emails to members of Congress or their staff. They tend to have very small email box sizes, so you have a good chance of having your message rejected if you include attachments. So we do recommend embedding URLs or other links in the text and body of an email message. And as I noted earlier, FASEB has some additional resources available on our website if you're interested in trying to meet with your member of Congress at home. We have our Become an Advocate microsite, and that includes all kinds of interesting tools and resources under the Advocacy Toolkit. You can request a meeting. We give you step-by-step instructions, and we even have a template request, sort of basically the text of a letter or email that you can send to your member of Congress requesting the meeting. And we also provide some additional resources for how to get organized for the meeting. So this is available on FASEB's website. As we talked a little bit about reaching the science community and Congress, we also feel that this is a good resource that might be useful in your own community, especially if you want to take a more active role in talking about science and getting folks in your community more interested in science. We feel that this slide deck really does provide a nice job, or do a nice job, of demonstrating the value of research to taxpayers and voters whose taxes actually fund the National Institutes of Health. So it's a great community-based message. In terms of where you can present this information, this is just a partial list, and we assume that there may be other opportunities. But if you're lucky enough to have some kind of a science cafe program in your community, this would be a great, easy talk that you could do with some Q&A afterwards. Here in Washington, D.C., we have a monthly Nerd Night, which tends to be a big community-facing event. So you can just Google Nerd Night and see if there's one in your community. This would be a great talk there. Local community groups that you may be active in, who, especially in light of recent events, are more concerned about what's happening in Washington, D.C. and on policy issues. Membership organizations that you may already be a part of, like the Kiwanis Club or the Lions Club. Another type of organization that's a little bit different that you might not typically think about presenting to, but if they have some kind of an open forum, you can request to talk about this information. And particularly for some of these clubs that do have a social justice mission and coordinate with research-based groups in the community or local hospitals, this might be a particularly intriguing topic. If you're an undergraduate or you teach undergraduate and have to provide content for seminars or talks, this is as Bethany calls, an off-the-shelf tool that you can use to save a lot of time in preparing something for your lecture. Also very appropriate in high school settings if you're asked to do kind of a career day or give a talk. And then last but not least, your friends and family who are an important part of the conversation. You can certainly at the Thanksgiving table, if you'd like, bring out this slide deck. If you find that your family reunion or other events, that may sound like a sort of kind of crazy idea, but we really are trying to figure out ways to bring scientific information and messages to the community. That is a part of what FASEB does more broadly. And just to kind of wrap up here before we get to the Q&A portion of this webinar, in reaching the public, it's the same kind of structure. You want to get yourself organized. One thing you may want to do if you have a nerd night or some kind of community forum where you could present, probably a good idea to ask for ideas for some groups and venues where you might be welcome to give such a presentation. On this one, we definitely recommend utilizing any personal relationships that you might have with community groups, where if you're on the board or serving on a committee or some kind of leadership role, you can make that request. Make sure you make arrangements ahead of time. We envision this as a PowerPoint slide deck, so that requires some AV and technical specifications. You could also use it as a direct handout in paper if you'd like to. Advertising is very important. You want to make sure people are going to be there to draw it to your talk. This is if you have a long amount of time or a pretty good, robust presentation, you can do the whole slide deck, or you can customize this again. Particularly if you're, let's say, talking to a Kiwanis organization that may have a relationship with a local hospital that has a big profile in children's research. You may want to pull out some of the slides that talk about pediatric research. These are just some thumbnails and some additional handouts that we have available on the website. Bethany talked about our breakthroughs in bioscience and horizons in bioscience series before, and you can print these out or contact us if you'd like hard copies of them. The last thumbnail is a brand new fact sheet that we just released about a month ago about the National Science Foundation and the types of biological research that that agency funds. During the event, as you're presenting your slides and your information, really encourage sharing on social media if you can. Because these are very visual pieces, you can pull out graphics and things that are easily released in 140 count tweets, and make sure that you bring copies of handouts as well too. And then of course afterwards, the polite, make sure you thank the group that hosted you and give them your contact information in case any of the attendees have follow-up or are interested in getting a copy of the slide that they may want to customize for a presentation in the future. And if you have any questions about some of this information or you need additional help, you can always reach out to FASEB and we can provide you with resources as well. So this brings us to the end of the, oops, I apologize. We have one more slide. In addition to getting the word out to the community, if you're not in a position or you don't have an opportunity to make an actual presentation, there are other ways that you can use the information in this slide deck. Letters to the editor are something that is very readily available now. Almost every newspaper in your community will have some kind of an online ability to publish something. Make sure that when you check that out, you look at the publication submission guidelines, particularly for word count and those kinds of things. So you can really use this deck to pull information together to write a pretty sharp op-ed or letter to the editor. Again, on social media, because each slide has an image, you can put something up on your Twitter feed or on Instagram. We recommend you use the hashtag value of research so that we can start tracking this back and seeing how far that this presentation is spreading. If you're asked to write a blog post for any reason, either your personal blog or your departmental blog, this slide deck should hopefully help you complete that assignment in a relatively quick way because it includes some really good examples. And then last but not least, this would be great material for your professional society newsletter articles, especially during times when they may need additional articles that are evergreen and not tied to any particular timely topic or current event. This slide deck provides a good reminder of what the investment in biomedical research has brought us to date. So I'm going to turn this back now to my colleague Bethany, and we want to make sure that there's some time for questions and answers. Just as a reminder, we do have people on mute to minimize background noise, so we are going to have to ask that you submit your question in writing using the question. And we also got some questions that were submitted to us before the webinar. So Bethany, take it away.
Thank you, Jennifer. So one question we got is that there are a lot of biological fields and research outcomes that are not represented in the slide deck. And would we be adding some more slides in the future? And the answer is yes, to some extent. We do plan to keep this as an evergreen resource, and we'll be updating it in the future with new stats, new examples. We obviously can't cover everything, but we are especially happy to work with our member societies to create slides that focus on their fields of research and the agencies that fund them. So if you're a member of any of our 31 societies, let the staff know, and we're happy to work with them to develop some more custom slides.
Another question that came in, and we will share the slide deck with everyone after the presentation. We did get a request to give slide numbers so that it's a little bit easier to follow. So we will make sure that the version that you see after this presentation includes some slide numbers. That may also be helpful in kind of rearranging things if you're customizing your talk. So thank you for that suggestion. That's very helpful. Another question that came in, my state is the blue. I know this from my experience. Is this type of advocacy still important? I really don't want to be preaching to the choir. I think that's a great observation. And in fact, part of the reason we put this slide together was to make sure that among areas where we still have support, we want to make sure that we remind them on a pretty regular basis of what the value of the investment in research has been to date. So even in an area, or if you're speaking to a member of Congress has expressed support for this research before, you can have a more casual conversation where you pull information from the slide deck to really reflect on or talk about the improvements in research. I think last week was a pretty exciting week in the science world with the announcement of the Nobel Prizes. And here at FASEB, we were reflecting on how many of the winners of the prizes this year were people who had been federally funded for several decades and whose research just took that much time to really produce some really unique and amazing results. So this slide deck, even in an area where you have a lot of support, can give people new information and new talking points that they can use in their own advocacy.
Here's an interesting question. I have trouble talking about my research projects to non-scientific audiences. I try to start simple, but my explanations get really complicated really quickly. Do you have any tips how I can more effectively communicate my science? Well, there are a number of great resources out there for how to more effectively communicate science, but if you just want to start honing in real quickly, I'd think about trying to make it into a stump speech and think about what you would say to somebody who is, maybe a scientist in an adjacent field but not your own, and then maybe a scientist in a completely different area, and then slowly start moving away from the more technical language as you have to reshape it. And try to just hit 3 points. What are you working on? Why is it important? And what outcomes might come from your research? And each of those can be just a single sentence and can be very compelling.
Another participant has asked, the university where I work does not get a lot of federal funding for research from NIH or any agency for that matter. How can I make the case to my elected officials that increasing the NIH budget would be good to my state? This is also why we pulled this slide deck together to really talk about kind of the broader benefits of biomedical research, even if you're in an area where the federal dollars are not coming in as much as, say, a neighboring state or district. When making that argument, I think you want to focus on the greater good conversation, that all of this research benefits people across different types of diseases and patient populations. As Bethany mentioned during the presentation, in some cases, scientists have gone down a particular path of research in, let's say, cancer, and discovered something else, a very basic fundamental understanding about a different disease, or have used advances in cancer to try and attack more rare diseases or other things that for which there weren't a lot of answers. So again, the Back here, the idea is to kind of speak broadly about the benefits and investment in research, and if you can, personalize it to the senator or representative or the area. So, for example, if you just happen to be in Philadelphia, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, or CHOP, does a lot of pediatric research. You can talk about some of the, or pull out some of the slides that talk about where we are in that field of research. So even if you don't get a lot of federal funding, this basic information is valuable. You can also note to folks that while federal dollars for specific research for NIH goes to, let's say, a neighboring university, scientists collaborate very broadly across the scientific disciplines. And they speak with one another and get research ideas from each other. So research that money that doesn't come directly to their district is still beneficial. To better communicate science to non-scientists, have you all looked at the Allen Oliver Center for Communicating Science? They have great suggestions.
They certainly do, but there are a lot of great resources out there as well. Some of our societies have materials and even programs, including ASCMB, and I encourage you to look and see what your society provides as well, because they'll probably have examples that are specific to your field.
My university has pretty strict rules about employees engaging in advocacy. What can I do as a university employee to make sure I don't violate any policy? That is a great question, and I'm really glad somebody asked it. The first thing we recommend is to check in and find out what are those policies, and also try and find out what they mean by engaging in advocacy. Advocacy, by its definition, is a pretty broad term. So you going out and giving a talk in the community or to a group of postdocs or undergrads about the value of the federal investment in research funding may not be considered advocacy by your university or even your department. So find out what the rules are at first. We do recommend that you let your university government affairs office know what you're doing, whether it's in the local community or if you come to Washington, D.C. And by all means, share examples and copies of the FASEB resources with them and say, these are the materials that I plan to be using. It's also a good idea to find out if your university has any fact sheets or documents or brochures that they have put together about their participation in federal research. We highly recommend that you seek out those resources whenever you do a presentation. Another question that just came in, is Twitter really useful? Does social media make a difference? I think we could answer that one different ways. I'll jump in, Bethany, and talk a little bit about the Congressional Management Foundation, an organization here in Washington that's been working very closely with members of Congress and congressional offices for about 20 years. They've recently released a report where they surveyed congressional staff to find out their viewpoints of Twitter and whether or not it was a good advocacy tool. And the results were a little bit surprising, at least to me. As it turns out, Twitter is a great advocacy tool, and members of Congress and their staff are really starting to pay attention to what their constituents are saying on Twitter. As we've seen, I think, more recently with some of the big battles over healthcare, a lot of other organizations are using this as a resource. The Congressional Management Foundation data suggests that as few as 30 posts on social media about a single topic can be enough to get a member of Congress's attention and sway their opinion about an issue. So it is a really viable tool that you can use to reach out to your members of Congress. Again, we recommend using the hashtag and even coming up with your own custom hashtag and providing some kind of uplifting message on Twitter. And these are the kinds of things, these tweets could actually find their way into congressional speeches or newsletters in ways that members of Congress are communicating with their constituents. So being able to give a member of Congress a talking point about the value of research off of a tweet is a really cool idea.
So here's an interesting one. I don't have a blog or Twitter account. How can I use the slides online? Well, even if you don't have your own social media accounts or your own blog, other people do. You can offer to guest blog somewhere, or you can even just suggest to friends who are active Twitter users to use the slides. It doesn't have to necessarily come from you. You can be the conduit as well.
Another possible way to use this as well, if you don't have a blog or Twitter account, if you have an opportunity to speak at a professional conference, I would think, and definitely you can disagree with me, that many of these slides could actually be used in kind of a poster presentation. if the topics are broad enough, and you can pull some things together. So you don't necessarily have to use social media or online tools for your advocacy purpose and your communication purposes. Well, it looks like we have come to the end of any questions, so I will go ahead and let folks give them one more chance if you have a burning question that you want to submit in our last few minutes. Also wanted to make sure that folks know that if you have a suggestion for us about other topics to include in this slide deck, to reach out to FASEB, and we'll provide our contact information in the follow-up email. And a special mention for our FASEB member society. We would love and be delighted to co-brand this resource for you with your society's logo. It's a very simple process. Just submit a request to FASEB and we'll turn that around to you very quickly. And that's something that you can certainly use and place on your own society's website as well too. So thanks everyone for participating in the webinar today. We appreciate you logging in and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.